Hi, I'm Trevor Perry. Today's presentation is a different perspective again at IBM and the value of IBM. A lot of customers don't realize quite what they have in IBM, and in the business partner world, there's a lot of hardware business partners who end up wanting to have the business for the hardware, the infrastructure, but don't realize that there's actually customers needing to modernize their applications and go beyond where they're at, where they're traditional green screen applications, leveraging the value of IBM, but they've forgotten all of this. So this presentation is designed to just add a different flavor and make each of you think just a little bit differently about IBM. Feel free to use it, share it. I am going to include the slides as well, and it's up to you how you want to use it. It's yours. If you'd like more information, you can connect with me very, very easily. It's all over the location that you have here. So the first question I ask presentation or customers, people at conferences, is what's the URL for the IBM homepage? And the struggle that we have is that most of the people in IBM who claim to be IBM proponents haven't actually seen the IBM homepage in quite some time. But it's pretty simple to find. You don't need to know what it is because you can just put in IBM in Google. And this was done in March the 18th. 2019, and you'll see the very first one has got a short link directly to IBM. The fourth one on there is also a longer version, and that's the one that you can get to. But the cool part is that even with the misdirection of the other ones in the middle, IBM is there on the right-hand side, has a conversation about it, and that's pretty cool if you're looking for IBM. And look, there were no quotes in there, just IBM space I, and it works just fine. So it's pretty easy to find. The reason that I ask you why is because there's a lot of information on there that might help you in moving customers, having them understand IBM finding similar situations to your company or a company that you know that might be able to help. So there's the actual link. That is the shortcut link. That's fairly persistent. If in a couple of years it's changed, you can still Google it. But the question about what is on the IBM homepage is pretty important. The first question is this: where do I go get information about things that are happening with IBM customers? It's been a fairly big secret for such a long time, but if you click on that Hear from the Community button, it will take you to a site that's called IBM Customer Stories. And these are just a few that are on the page, and the IBM team at IBM has been collecting these, and they're continuing to do it. They started for the 30th anniversary. They wanted to have 30 customer stories, and this is now growing like crazy. So if you have a situation, you want to go read some of these because they might help you get ideas for what you want to do with IBM, how you leverage IBM, how you keep IBM, how you grow, all of those kinds of things. So I'm going to take a bit of a detour and ask you a question here: is what is the number one supercomputer on the planet? Now this is March 2019. There was an announcement of the top supercomputers on the planet, and we found actually number 2 is a supercomputer called Sierra that has IBM Power 9 processors. This is what IBM runs on. We're running on the same thing as a supercomputer, and the number 2 and the number 1 supercomputer called Summit are both running IBM Power 9 processors. A lot of cores, and in fact, there were several thousand, couple of thousand of them were running Watson for a while. And now Watson Anywhere is going to allow you to run Watson on Power 9 in your location. So Power 9 is really quite important, and IBM is running at that level, at that current hardware, and will grow with whatever comes after Power 9 and beyond. Another place to look for information is the IBMI Chief Architect's blog. And if you haven't found it, it's Steve Will is the Chief Architect, and it's on the IBMSystemsMag.com. And the blog is called You and I. And in fact, in October, Steve wrote a blog called A Very Good Year for IBM I about 2018. And there were 4 quarters in a row of growth of Power Systems revenue. And it was up from last year, the same quarter last year. And the cool part is IBM I was a very strong contributor to those results. We want to know another step, understanding what IBM I open source systems are. And Jesse Gusinsky is in charge of IBM I open source at IBM. And he wrote this in January, which is the 10 amazing things that happened in 2018 from his perspective. And it's really amazing. I'll let you go and read this because it's really quite a fascinating list of things. It's really good to see Jesse's perspective. And the number 10 thing was the Yum and RPM packages, and that was quite incredible. It allows us in the community to grow our PACE and OSS applications on IBM I without waiting for IBM to do all the work for us. We can bring our own packages, and that was cool. For me, number 6 is the really big thing. There's a mono port from the Mono open source project to IBM I. It's been brought by the community. Jesse talks about it in this. And that means that .NET and ASP.NET applications are going to be able to run through Apache, which is IBM I. So that's quite incredible. And I am just totally amazed at how things are quite progressing in the open source community. It's pretty fabulous. So the next thing to think about is what's the future of IBM. There's been a lot of talk about this, and recently in San Francisco, I think 2019, Ginny Rometty actually stood in front of a crowd of 12,000 people and talked about the future. She suggested that innovation is what we've been doing. We've experimented with AI, etc., etc. We've been doing digital, but very randomly. And chapter 2 is the next stage of innovation. And that means we're going to actually do transformation and true digital transformation as opposed to just randomly dabbling. We're gaining speed and scale. And the 3 things she talked about were fabulous: digital and AI, hybrid cloud, and responsible stewardship, which is really beyond the actual technology. And it's how we actually set the technology up for us to be the stewards of the data, the businesses, and architecture, infrastructure, all of those kinds of things. And also for the future of IT, and that includes humans and it includes students and bringing people together and being stewards of the future for IT and the people who are coming up. She also introduced Watson Anywhere, which basically means that Watson doesn't have to run just in IBM and IBM's cloudiness. We actually can run Watson wherever we need to. We can take it, and that's on-prem Watson is fabulous. She also talked about a couple of things, which is the 2 distinct approaches that people are doing to digital transformation, outside in and inside out. We've been talking about that a long time with architecture and how outside in modernization and transformation is you start by looking at what's outside, and for us that can be integration with other things. It can be the face that you're offering, and that changes the application to the consumers of the application. And then inside out means we're actually changing that stuff under the covers and architecting, she says, your business for change. And that's what we do a lot of. And doing that means that you see less modernization, less digital transformation on the outside, but you set yourself up to be able to provide more agile and more functional digital transformation as you move forward. And I really loved her quote, there can't be AI without IA, information architecture, and we need that platform. And we, with IBM I, are part of that information architecture. We've been supplying that for a long time, and we're part of that. So whatever IBM's doing, we actually have some value in there, and we can fit into this future and forward-looking approach that IBM has, which is great. So IBM has a future. Let's talk about IBM I's future. If you look at the next platform, it's a sister magazine to IT Jungle, and this is from IBM puffs up the power iron on its public cloud. It's a bit of a story that says IBM I and AIX are now in beta in the IBM cloud. So this is going to be transformative. What we're going to see is that we're going to see how customers start wanting to start to use IBM I in the cloud and in the IBM cloud, and that means all the other managed service providers and hosters and etc., infrastructure as a service, those people, platform as a service, they're going to see their demand increase as well, because IBM is going to do it one flavor of this, and there are other companies who are going to be able to see what the demand is and meet that demand. It's really quite amazing. Steve Sibley said they'll probably just hire and rent IBM I in the cloud to do their development and test environment, see if it can run, and then people will start using it for disaster recovery. And then there's a business angle which, hey, look, I want to start a new business. Why don't we put IBM I in the cloud and run the business from there? But eventually we might move it back to the data center, so we might have a hybrid cloud at that point. So there's a lot of ways that it's going to be done, but it's transformative for IBM I industry. At the same time, the article, Power Systems Driving More Revenue Than Initially Thought, is really quite fascinating because they started looking at the numbers. And what's happening is, while this is Power Systems revenue, it's been dropping for a long time, there's been a bit of an uptick. Certainly we don't know how much this is going to go on, how much longer this will go on, but it's very, very positive. And you'll see this chart shows the below the middle are the down growth and the negative growth, and the above. And you look at the last part of this for the last 4 quarters, it's been consistently positive growth in Power Systems, and that's really quite amazing. The concept here and the content was that these people have been watching IBM I for a long time and watching Power Systems believe that this is a larger business than we might have expected. People don't know how big it is because it tends to be this kind of secret. But look, it's profitable and growing, and I like their comments. It could be worse, it has been, and it is getting better. And this should help address some of the people who say the platform's disappearing. It's solid, it's running a lot of businesses, and it isn't going anywhere, and this is proof of that. And then eWeek wrote an article that was IBM I, the most amazing IBM product you've never heard of. And this particular author was just drooling over IBM I think, and didn't really understand it, and sort of forgotten that the 400 was even around in any form, didn't realize it had morphed and evolved into this amazing IBM I. So it was pretty amazing. And the quote was quite fun, which is, after the briefing on IBM I, if you could wrap this platform in spandex, you could put it in the next Avengers movie as a real live superhero. And that's somebody who hasn't been around it for a while and hasn't seen it for a while and comes out, well, it's there and it's doing an amazing and incredible job. This is something we need to spread a little bit for some of our people. So, how do I leverage IBM I? Well, it's pretty interesting. A lot of people actually don't know what IBM I is, and we need to understand what IBM I is. We need to learn what its value is and what its value is for our organization. And part of my day job is to actually do these. We spend time with customers discovering their current situation with IBM I and their entire environment. Then we decide on a future for their IT and where they should be heading. And we help build a roadmap for them to take them to the future, which could leverage all the things on IBM I they simply don't realize. So we get a lot of people ask the question, can I keep my IBM I, whatever the name that they use? And the answer is that no, you cannot keep this, because this is not IBM I. Even though it says IBM I main menu on it, this is a green screen representation that has been around forever and ever and ever, and it's just a very small fraction of what IBM I can do, and it's what people look at to say it's old and it's outdated. So no, we don't want to keep this at all. When we look at a customer and we say, what's your IBM I situation, you'll find that generally it's a developed system that was developed with System 36, 38, AS400 code, and it's just been maintained and evolved over the years. So is it just green screens? Are all you're doing just delivering reports or spreadsheets to people? Do you have manual change management and DevOps tools? Everything you do you just repeat the processes over and over and over again and have no automation? Is your code outdated and the techniques inside the code monolithic and outdated and using techniques that are just not what we do in today's world? Repeating code. I've got the same code in 10 places and I need to make a change to it. Will I be able to find all of those places? And what will it impact if I change them all? We don't really have a proper testing methodology that includes not only just the basic unit testing and automated testing of modules, but we don't have full user acceptance testing. And so many of the customers that we find running IBM typically will just put something into production because they can. And it's got nothing to do with whether they should or not, and whether it's tested and it's ready to go. The tools are outdated, the developers are outdated, using outdated tools, and the approach is very much, I can't change, and it's a very defeatist approach, and that's very common, and some of that may or may not apply to you. We've got a lot of customers where it really truly applies all of that to them and more. So we struggle with them thinking about their systems with green and applications, and I've given this, shown this a lot, and that is if you want to dig ditches, you can dig it with an AS400, which is a fairly manual kind of effort, or you can step up to IBM I, which is a shovel on a major tractor, and get some work of digging ditches done. And the thing we have to understand is that that is truly the evolution of the platform. We're no longer just able to write just green screens that do the job that we need for accounting or manufacturing. We're able to go far beyond that, deliver applications anywhere, anytime, and it's quite incredible. And the history is often missed. If we look at this 38 and 36 evolution to 400, we never called it anything but 400 because that's what we got, and it was quite incredible. That was a major change and a major day in the world of a lot of people. And then up until 2006, where we got the System I, it changed names a little bit, but it was essentially the same thing until 2008. 2008, they got the System I running a thing called i5OS, which was originally OS 400, and they got System P running the AIX. They merged all the hardware and the functionality together into one set of servers called Power Systems. This is bigger than 36 and 38 into 400, much bigger. And people don't see that. We often tell customers, you can migrate from AS400 and get off that platform and come to IBM I running on Power Systems. It's a new platform. It will run all your old AS400 applications. And it's the cheapest migration that there is. And then we can start leveraging the power and the value of IBM I. If you see, you have to go back historically to see what the value of IBM I is, and people miss this completely. It's more than an operating system. It's truly an operating environment. The database is built in and integrated completely, so if you have 10 vendors, they're all using a version of the same database. You don't have to try and spend time integrating between disparate systems. Its securability is beyond question. A lot of customers don't secure a system as well as they should. But it is securable and it can be done. It is the best in the world in that regard. Scalability, reliability, availability, all the tenets of what our system has been for such a long time. Virtualization is something that we forget. People go, oh, I've got to have another virtual machine. IBM I can run multiple workloads in the same place. We had a customer running 2 partitions, and we did the same workload on both. And one was running at 57%. And after we tuned the second one, it was running at 99%. The complaint was, well, you can't do that. You're using too much of the system. And that might be valid for a Microsoft Windows server where you want to avoid over-engineering the load. But on IBM I, if it's running at 99% and it's running efficiently, it's able to handle the throughput that you throw at it, and that's the goal. And it's really quite a fascinating difference between, oh, I can't run my server at 99% in Microsoft, to If I'm running at 100%, I'm getting the value out of IBM I. And integration. I stands for integration. It can be integrated internally, which means that if I want to have an upgrade, the PTFs from IBM will solve a lot of those things internally. It's all integrated. The database is integrated, and I have integration with other platforms, especially the ones that are on the same power systems hardware. And IBM I has a roadmap. It's one of the very few operating systems on the planet. It's the only operating environment on the planet that has a roadmap. And we know that this is a good roadmap, that currently we're at 7.3. We expect something coming up soon with I next. We know they're working on the one past that as well. They've been doing this since 6.1 in 2008. And so we know that they've kept their promises in this regard. We understand this is valuable, and the multitude of technology refreshes we get every 6 months, and generally in April and October, gives us extreme added value. So if they're going to give us a new version of the operating system, it means there's some big things that are coming, and personally, I cannot wait for that. I'm excited. And IBM I has a support roadmap that goes far beyond 2027. And that's really fascinating because we've now got the ability to know that IBM is committed to IBM I for the longer term. And this is one of the very few platforms that has anything like this, if not the only one. And if you follow Cork plus Lepton's study on IBM I compared to Windows SQL Server and Linux and Oracle, here we discovered the 3-year cost by platform are basically multiplications of 3 on top of IBM I if you're running Windows and SQL Server, SQL Server, or Linux and Oracle. And you'll have a notice that the biggest gap, the biggest cost in there for all of these platforms is the personnel. It costs so much to run the same workload on the other platforms than it does with IBM I. We always know that we've had less requirements for things. And that's part of why there are people in consulting companies who don't want to touch IBM I, because there's simply not the requirement for us to spend all this time managing, running, consulting, building applications, because it's so well-rounded and it's so easy in that regard. Total cost of ownership and total cost of acquisition. Acquisition is the blue. The ownership on ongoing costs is the yellow. And again, IBM I beats Windows SQL Server and Linux Oracle hands down in that regard. And this is an independent study commissioned by IBM, but not influenced by them. And they came out with these numbers on real customers, and it's quite incredible. And even the cost of downtime that they measured over 3 years for IBM I 7.3 was far less than for the cost of downtime for the other two platforms that it was comparing. So IBM I has such value, and we have to understand that. We have to spread this word to people and show these numbers and these figures. And again, feel free to show these to whoever you need. So, can I keep my IBM I applications? Well, what's your IBM I future? What's your IT future? Your IT future should include some of these following, and maybe more. We need to access our applications anywhere and any time. We need more dashboards, and we need those dashboards to include not just applications, but also the delivery of the information and the analytics that is important now for businesses to be able to make decisions. We need our IT future to be agile. We would like to have a single source of data of record so that we can rely upon it, and we know that it's secure, and as custodians of that, we're looking after it for the businesses. We need to be future thinking, and that includes things like Internet of Things, IoT, AI, artificial intelligence, and things like Watson. We know that we can connect Watson to IBM I very easily, and if we want to extend into analytics and to do amazing things like face recognition, all of these kinds of things, Watson can handle that, and IBM I and its business applications can integrate tightly. So are these things in our IT future? Well, they might be, but we have to have technically a destination architecture. What will it look like when we get there? and we must start building applications towards that. And we also need to know that as we do that modernization, we can choose how we do it because we can build a coexistence fabric that enables the old and the new, or two disparate systems to be able to coexist. And so our reference architecture we've been working on is essentially got multiple layers in it, and I'll go through each of those. The database layer is the first one, where we would have our tables, our indexes would support that, and the views would be the way we would access the database on IBM I. And we access it through a set of database services in the database access layer, where we might have for each of the tables, through the views, we have the standard CRUD, create, read, update, delete, and the standard list functions, and potentially some more. And then we have business process layer, and that business processes layer has services that do many things. It may just be some business rules or some utilities related to the functionality, or it could be a whole process, such as it might be all the information related to and the processes related to order entry, for example, or order maintenance, customer order, if you will, purchase order, and it might be those. And it could be orchestrations of multiple granular rules, or it could be a bunch of business rules that perform individual functions that are consumed. And where do they get consumed from? Well, generally from the user interface. And the user interface could be, in today's world, it shouldn't be, but some people still do 5250 and then have some front end facing and repurposing on that. But it could also be another front end through AngularJS. It could be a .NET application. It could be many things. It could be an independent Java application. But that interface layer then talks to the business processes layer. And then in a similar manner, the same interface, we have APIs or web services that are exposing the functionality that we have, both for people to consume from the outside, or for us to be able to go to other places. And that's the interface layer at the top level as well. And we call this cross-cutting, which is basically things like messaging. So if something happens in the database layer, for the database rules to apply and some constraint hits, we actually can communicate that back all the way up to the top through that communication cross-cutting to let the user interface know that something is happening. Could include security. It could include any other things. Generally, on IBM I, we often have things like SQL global variables that are used in between, and that's a cross-cutting kind of technique and architecture that we can use. So having this destination architecture of where we want our applications to be is key. This is a suggestion. We've been using it a lot, and a lot of people love it. But IBM I works really well in this environment to have this architecture, and modern IBM I applications should be built to an architecture that either matches this or is similar to this, because this is how architectures in the modern world are being implemented. Now, there is an argument about whether we need N-tier layers, whether we just say you can only consume one of these from the layer above it, or whether it's an MVC where you can access many of the different functionality from many different layers. But ultimately, you would end up with these similar layers anyway, whether you use N-tier or MVC. So, watch this space. We're going to talk more about this, but our IBM I customers are gaining value out of building a reference architecture like this. Now, of course, we need that coexistence fabric, and the coexistence fabric comes in many ways. And IBM I just does an absolutely fabulous way of having these artifacts between old and new code, modernized code and original code. And there are many ways to do that. We can have, for the old tables, when we need them accessed in new programs, we can have a false data access layer that's there that just pretends to be that new layer, even though it's working with the old tables, and that's easy to do. We can have surrogate files that represent the new database to the old programs, either perfect surrogates or imperfect that require minor changes and minor impact to the code. We can have open access handlers that basically are put in the place of the original file, but can go access the new file or file structure. If you've normalized files, you may have originally looked up one file out of one program, but now you need two, and we can do that through an open access handler and combine it and represent it the same way as the original file was to those original programs. We can use field duplication, where we have an old field that's a 6-character date and the new date field, and the old programs use the old date and the new programs use the new date, and everything works fine, and we use a series of triggers to be able to keep those fields in sync. And we can have data duplication. We could have data in 2 different places and have a synchronization process through triggers to make sure that the data is completely synchronized, and then the old programs and the new programs can all be working on essentially what is the same data until we don't need the old one anymore, and we can just take that out of service. And then, of course, any APIs or services that we might be able to include for accessing new information in other places from old programs or vice versa. But no matter what you have to do, you have to build a roadmap. You might decide where you're headed and what your destination architecture looks like. You know where you are, and then we build a roadmap which says we're going to do it in a certain manner. One of the typical ones is people often take the approach that is, I'm going to do the face first. And that's a bit of outside-in modernization, where I get some value in the user thinks there's some activity going on because I'm giving them some extra added functionality that way. So in all of this, whether or not you can do this immediately or whether this takes you some period of time, a roadmap is very, very, very key. And everybody's roadmap is going to be slightly different. And it's going to be based on business priorities. It's going to be based on the staff that you have and the developer skills, all of those kinds of things, the tools you have available to you, and so on. And so building roadmaps is quite a bit of a joy that we have, and I had several I was going to show you, but all of them are for individual customers, and there is no one single roadmap that actually applies. So be aware that your roadmap is going to be different than everybody, even though you might be in a similar technological instance or situation. But ultimately, you can include IBMI in that. We have the architecture, we have the Coexistence Fabric, we have the functionality on IBMI, we have the future on IBMI. And so IBMI has longevity, but we've got to do something about it, and now it's your turn. Appreciate you listening today. Feel free to take this and send this anywhere and share it, and I'll make the slides available for you, and appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.